Hi, this is Ibarionex from the Candid frame, and I'm going to walk you through the process of making an image that I was pretty pleased with this past weekend. I went out there, and it had been a while since I've been in downtown, and I went around 10:30 or 11 o'clock, which is a little later than I usually go out there because around noon isn't the most ideal light, but I wanted to show that even if you're shooting during the middle of the day, you can still get some really interesting photographs as long as you're paying attention to where the light's coming from. So I'll walk you through that process right here. So here's the initial shot I made of the scene. I'd just gotten out of the car, probably had walked no more than 15 or 20 feet from the vehicle when I saw this phone booth, and more specifically the light being cast by the sun against the signage and the phone. And I made this initial shot not because I thought this was going to make a great picture, but just because I knew that this was my starting point, and I wanted to see what it looked like within the context of the frame. So I made, these initial shots, kind of vary the composition to see how much of the shadows, how much of the signage I would need to include. But at that point, I felt like, well, I'm going to need something more because just this alone is not going to make it for me. So I went from vertical to composing the shot horizontally. And I just started anticipating when people were going to walk into the frame. First from the right to the left and then left to the right. I was already aware of what my overall composition was going to be in terms of the relationship of those shadows and the phone booths and phone booth in the shot. But now at this point I had to make a decision in terms of, okay, what do I need to pay attention to? Is it people walking from the left or people walking from the right? And so I made some shots here. I didn't even include the subject there. I just saw the shadow coming into the frame, and I made the shadow just to see whether the shadow alone might make an interesting element in the shot. You can see the figure just entering the frame here along the edges, but the sun was positioned high enough that the subject was going to be placed pretty low in the frame. And that wasn't really going to do it for me. So I just kept varying my composition slightly to include more or less. It was kind of tricky because I was standing right at the curb, and I found that if I had the camera to my eye and just waited for people to walk into the frame, a lot of people ended up stopping because they didn't want to ruin my photograph. So oftentimes I would just have it at my waist, and just as they enter the frame, I would raise it to my eye and make the shot. And for the most part, I was using a relatively, I think the ISO was around 400. And 400 shutter speed of 400th of a second at f/16. And I chose that combination because, one, I wanted the deep depth of field, because I knew that if I didn't nail the focus right on the subject, I still nevertheless would want to have enough depth of field to keep them sharp. And the 1/400th of a second was enough to keep them relatively sharp for my photograph. So as different people enter the frame, I just started becoming conscious in terms of exactly where I wanted to place them. And I quickly realized I didn't want them obscuring the phone. I wanted them in that area right here where this woman was standing. But unfortunately, a lot of people were walking in pairs or in large groups. So it was difficult to just have a solitary figure that I could frame there. So I just kept making shots as different people passed by. This was as close as I got here to something that I thought was interesting. I mean, I love the gesture of her hand here, but she was a little too close to the phone for me here, and we don't see much of her face. And we get this figure here on the right coming into the frame, but I felt that the shot wasn't particularly balanced. In the next shot, we get a little closer to that, but I still wasn't happy with the shot. But this was more in line with what I was hoping to go for. So you can see here that the initial scene that I captured in terms of the light and shadow and the placement of these subjects is still playing a context in terms of my overall composition, but I'm looking for something that I really can't predict. And it really is a matter of just waiting and trying to make shots. So I continued making frames, and this one came pretty close. This woman came in. She was very aware that I was there, and here's the shot that I thought almost worked. I mean, it may work. I really have a hard time saying. She's aware of the camera, which I don't mind at this point. But in terms of her placement, I think it's good. I don't like the white here of the thing that she's shielding her child in here, and I don't know. It has almost all the elements that I want. I just it just doesn't make it for me. It's really hard to quantify sometimes, but that was about as close as I could get. For some reason, it doesn't show them in the order that I captured them in. But you can see that, I had several opportunities to shoot her as she moved into the frame. And by this time, she's completely moving out of the frame. So you can see that this position here was sort of ideal in just terms of her location within the composition, but it wasn't enough for me. It didn't make me completely happy. This one might have done it, but I just missed it in terms of timing. She needed to be here. I love the color in terms of the red vest and the blue shirt, but it just didn't work here. And, I kept shooting, but I was never really happy with what I got. I mean, this here, you get the nice gesture of the hand, the glasses on the forehead. That's kind of interesting, but again, I've made shots similar to that, and it really wasn't anything exceptional for me. So I kind of stayed at that spot for a while, but it really didn't make it. I was still paying attention to the light when I moved a little further down the street, because this street was going west to east or east to west. And so I was still paying attention to the light and the shadow, trying to find a scene in the setting that might work for me. And I found this here with this awning and this wall and this window providing what I thought was very similar light. I eliminated the whole issue with the phone booth. And now I just started making shots of people passing by here. And here, I just made a short series of images. When I saw this figure here, I knew that I wanted the woman in the shot. I really love her hair. Again, they were walking in a group, so I really had to hope that there was enough separation between them so that there wasn't this just big cluster. So, again, for whatever reason, I'm not seeing the images in a complete order. But you can see here, they're moving through the frame together. The light is hitting her because she's closer to the wall, and the rest of them being relegated to shadow. And the shot that I was completely happy with ended up being this last frame here. And I think this ended up being the most interesting shot here, because not only did I get the great light on her and the color of her shirt and her hair, but I have this figure here that's basically rendered as a silhouette in the frame. And that provided a sense of depth and a point of contrast to the image that I think really, really helped it. I've shot so many photographs of people sort of walking into the light and using these very graphic shadows within the frame in order to create a nice composition. But having this figure in the foreground really helped the image pop a little bit, and it served as a great counterpoint to her. I would probably crop the image a little more because we have this jewelry behind the window here, which I don't think is very necessary, and we have the forehead and the nose of the third person of this group moving into the frame. So I probably either would crop these out, or just by doing some tonal adjustments, including a curve adjustment, probably render these things to black so you don't have any detail in these areas here. But you can see overall that like I've talked about in a lot of the other videos, that looking for light and setting first, even before you look for subject matter, is a really great way to build up your compositions. It can add depth to them. It can add complexity to a photograph. And it's something that I'm always trying to pursue. So whenever I'm out on the street, I'm always looking for the light first, then the setting in the background, and then my subject. There'll be times when I will just see something and I will just raise the camera to my eye and make the photograph. But if I have the leisure of time, I'm really going to try to build my photographs piece by piece. So I hope that's helpful to you. And if you like what you're seeing here, please subscribe. And if you're finding us for the first time and have not heard the Candid Frame podcast, visit us at thecandidframe.com, and you'll find hundreds of interviews with some of the world's best photographers, both established and emerging. And that's at thecandidframe.com. So thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.